Awesome. What's up, everybody? We're gonna do some gut health stuff today. I call this Gut Health 101, the basics you need to know. And I'm still on a learning curve here. So I have the registered dietitian, the nutrition, like functional nutritionist lady that I work with that reads all of your gut health tests, and she is teaching me along the way, kind of doing some hand holding. But I thought that it was really like I'm to a point where I'm learning a lot more about this stuff and how important it is. And I wanted to share kind of just like the basics of what I know with you, especially since I'm kind of doing my own gut health series on social media right now. So I wanted to answer any questions that you guys might have within my current scope as it is ever expanding at this time. So Gut Health 101. I'm going to share my screen and get this pulled up. Share. Let's see. Got that. Jess, can you see it? I never know.
I can.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to present. I want to actually present with my notes because I made a bunch of notes and I don't want to miss anything for you guys. So here we freaking go. Got it. I'm actually going to be just looking over here because my notes are on this other side. So Gut Health 101. Again, the basics of what you need to know. So tonight we're gonna take this just like a little bit deeper than just eat fiber and drink water, right? I feel like that's kind of almost been the extent of our gut health discussions up until this point, and it's like fiber, fiber, fiber. Um, do your test and send it in, right? But tonight we're gonna talk about what actually lives in your gut, what those microbes actually do, what disrupts them, what can help make them healthy, and how to rebuild intelligently. So you should leave knowing the absolute basics. And I kept this really high level for A, time purposes, and B, again, like I said, I'm still learning as we kind of go on and we do more and more of your guys' tests. It's really cool because everyone's gut is so different. And I even had some stuff pop up in my gut health test today when I was reviewing it with Emily that I had never seen before. So we had a lot of good discussions, and I was just like, I think it is time to impart some of this wisdom. So, what does the gut actually do? A lot of you are like, no duh on the first one, but that's kind of right the extent of what we know about it is it digests and absorbs nutrients, and that's what it does, right? Well, come to find out, it does a whole hell of a lot more than just that. It also communicates with your brain. It houses most of your immune system. It influences inflammation in your body, and it affects hormone production and chronic disease risk. And more than just hormone production as well. We're going to get into that too. It influences enzyme production, neurotransmitter production, and some certain vitamins as well. So, tiers of nutrition. If you guys did your onboarding, I know that that nutrition onboarding video is pretty long. I have it on my list to make it shorter and more digestible, literally. It just is going to take some time to get there. But if you were able to watch it, this was at the very beginning, and it's the tiers of nutrition, right? So we have step one is just eating enough and hitting that protein goal, hitting that calorie goal on a regular basis. That's step one. When you're in step one, I don't necessarily want you worried about everything else because this is foundational, right? So everything we talk about tonight, for the most part, is going to live in step two, which is improve quality, which means adding fiber in there, adding plant diversity in there, and getting enough micronutrients. So most people out there in the world, they try to start at step two while skipping step one. And this can just create frustration because the baseline of getting enough calories to sustain your body on a regular basis. And hitting that protein goal is going to be absolutely, like I said, foundational. And if you don't have that in place, then you might just end up frustrated trying to do step two, which you might hear people call this kind of like, well, I eat clean, right? But like most people don't really maybe even know what that means. And if you're eating clean, but you're getting way, way too much or way, way too little, you're still going to end up feeling totally stuck, which is why we have this lockstep ladder here in this program. Eat enough, and then we can introduce that improved quality of food to kind of round out the rest of it, and especially making that gut microbiome healthy. So, what keeps the gut healthy? We talked about this just a sec, like just now. I just said it. First of all, step one. Step one does. Without step one, we're just chasing our tails, right? So eating enough protein, eating enough calories, in that energy balance zone, which is like your plus or minus 100 calorie range. And then we have more than that too. So protein specifically is going to repair the gut lining and stabilize your blood sugar. And then fiber is going to really help in different ways. There's different types of fiber. We want to try to aim for 25 to 35 grams a day. We have soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, and resistant starches. And I'm going to talk about what those do in a different slide as well. And then plant diversity. So different colors of the rainbow. You might have heard people say when they're talking about gut health, like eat as many colors of plant foods as you can throughout the week. And the tiny health lady, so the nutritionist always tells me try to aim for like 20 to 25 different kind of colors of plant foods throughout the week, or 5 different plant food colors throughout the day. And then keeping calm. Believe it or not, you're like, oh, Stevie, stress is like connected to everything, right? And it totally is. So being calm before eating is going to create a situation where you're more parasympathetic. So we have the sympathetic nervous system and then the parasympathetic nervous system, and that sympathetic drive is created for when you need to like do something, right? It's like you are turned on, you're ready to go. We have some more adrenaline dumping, some more cortisol coming out to help you meet a demand. And then the parasympathetic is aptly called rest and digest. And it's called that because we actually end up being able to digest our food so much better when we're in this state. So being calm before eating is extremely beneficial. So 3 to 5 slow breaths before you start eating can help with this. Making sure you're sitting down while you're eating. You're chewing your food thoroughly, like 20 to 25 like chews per bite, which is crazy. When you think about it, you're like, oh my God, that'd take me so long. But just like do your best. Try to chew a little bit more maybe than you normally do. And then doing one thing at a time. I just did a story on this today because that was part of my protocol from the nutritionist. She was like, yo, you need to chill out when you're eating. What are you doing when you're eating? I'm like, everything. And I'm eating very quickly. So I was like, okay, I can do this. So for lunch, I sat down and I was like, I'm going to take my breaths. I'm going to just sit here and I'm going to just eat. And that's it. It was really hard for me. So this is a practice that may not come easy, but is going to be super beneficial, especially if you're somebody who's like, oh my gosh, I have some like digestive issues. I'm having some bloating. I'm having some gas. I'm having some discomfort, stuff like that. This can be really helpful. It is also going to make sure that you're producing enough stomach acid, enough, right? Not too much or not too little. This piece right here can really help with that. So that's one really simple, practical way that you can help yourself with digestion without having a fancy gut test or knowing specific interventions. So what disrupts the gut? Right, anything in step one that you're skipping, right? Chronic dieting, skipping meals, not getting enough protein, and poor sleep, high stress, excess alcohol, too much ultra processed food for too long can do this as well. And I would argue outside of energy balance, especially. I think ultra processed food matters potentially a little bit less if we're eating within balance. There's a place for it, right? I'm not here to demonize it, but it can cause issues, especially in excess. And the gut, like, absolutely does not like this kind of chaos on repeat. And sleep, stress, and skipping meals or chronic dieting are much bigger disruptors than most people actually realize. Okay, Stevie, but what is the gut microbiome? What does that mean? Well, your gut contains trillions of microbes, hundreds of species of these things. It's like an entire ecosystem. And it's like an ecosystem where everyone has their own job. All right, so there's tons of different microbes. Some of these break down fiber, some of these produce short chain fatty acids, neurotransmitters, different enzymes. Some of them regulate inflammation. Some of them support your immune system. Some of them influence estrogen metabolism, and others signal to your brain to do certain things. And it's not necessarily about each one of these things being good or bad necessarily. It's about the balance and diversity that you're housing in your gut, because we have all of these different ones that kind of, perform different jobs. We don't really want anyone to be like a LeBron James in here. We don't want anyone carrying the team. We want everybody working together to do the thing that they need to do in proportion. And we get problems when we have some of these being overgrown for their job or undergrown for their job. And those are the things that we are trying to fix and that we can measure now. And we're still learning a ton in this field as well. Even the top experts are still learning stuff about this every single month, probably. So what does a healthy gut microbiome produce? Hopefully in proportion, right? So these are some of the things. Your gut bacteria aren't just like passive passengers, they're actually like metabolically active. And when your microbiome is healthy and well fed, it produces entire categories of these different compounds that influence your health. So short chain fatty acids is one of them. Some of these are butyrate, acetate, propionate. These are compounds that fuel your colon cells, right? So you want those cells to be active and to have the health they need to do their specific functions. They reduce inflammation. These things can help regulate blood sugar and support metabolic health overall. So if you don't have any fermentable fiber, then you might not have very much short chain fatty acid production, which you could see may be problematic, because then you might have some unchecked inflammation or some difficulty regulating your own blood sugar. And your colon cells might be weak and not firing on all cylinders. So there are interventions that we can do if we know your gut isn't producing some of these things. And I mentioned vitamins, vitamin synthesis. So certain bacteria can synthesize vitamin K, B vitamins like biotin and folate, amongst others. And they're not your primary source of getting these things, but they absolutely do contribute. Another one is neurotransmitters and signaling molecules. So your gut microbes, believe it or not, influence things that you might have heard of before. Serotonin, dopamine, GABA, I talked about GABA last night on my stories. GABA is like kind of a master neurotransmitter. It's going to help you with mood regulation and stress resilience. And your gut is actually producing some of this stuff. They aren't gonna, they don't necessarily make you happy, but they influence that gut-brain communication system. And if these are low, then they can certainly help, right? So it's like, hey, we have these medications called serotonin, SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which means we want more serotonin kind of floating around in the synapse of your brain neurons for a little bit longer. So you could see if we could kind of signal more of that happening, then it might be able to have an effect where that's helpful, especially if you're experiencing lower levels of these things. And digestive enzymes and metabolites. So some microbes help break down fiber, resistant starches, different types of foods, and proteins. And they convert these compounds into bioactive forms that your body can actually use. So some of you here, I think there's been a handful of you where your body is not really doing the things as well to create the enzymes to break down protein, which is problematic, right? Especially when we have you on a higher protein diet. So you might be taking digestive enzymes to help that out. And just as we get older, in most of us, that's just going to become a harder and harder process regardless. But these enzymes, taking them orally can really help there, especially if we find out that your gut's not making those enzymes as much. And immune modulating signals. So the microbiome trains your immune system. It helps your body learn what is a threat and what is not a threat. And low gut microbiome diversity is associated with more immune dysregulation. So we can look at that too. And if we see that there's low diversity, some of you might have seen like I think it's like your Shannon diversity score. If that's really low, then we may do some interventions to increase your gut diversity so that your immune system is amplified. And amongst other things as well, diversity is super important, as you've seen from everything else we've talked about, because every microbe has a job. So healthy microbes can also help maintain the gut lining. So these barrier support compounds. The physical barrier we're talking about here between your digestive tract and your bloodstream. So when that is disrupted, it's not necessarily a good thing. But when the barrier is strong, you'll have less inflammation, better nutrient absorption, and better immune balance. So these are some of the things that your gut does to keep you healthy on a day-to-day basis. Now, who are the major players in your gut? Who are some of these? We're going to do kind of like a roll call here. And not all of them, because there's literally thousands, probably even more than that are possible to be in there. But these are some of the major players that we all have and that we all need. So again, like I said, instead of thinking of them as good versus bad, we're thinking about roles and distribution. So a healthy gut has different groups doing different jobs, and these are some of them. These are some of the big major players. Bifidobacteria. So these are some of the most studied beneficial bacteria in the gut microbiome. They ferment fiber into short-chain fatty acids, super important, right? Support immune balance, help maintain gut barrier integrity, and they compete against pathogenic bacteria that might try to become overgrown and take over. So these guys are super important. When we have low bifidobacteria population in our guts, we often see low fiber intake because you might not be able to tolerate it as much. Higher stress, higher expression of stress, and lower ability to deal with it. And sometimes, bifidobacteria can be wiped out with antibiotics, as can all of these. So you don't want Bifidobacterium absent, but you also don't want one of them dominating, because diversity matters. We need the distribution to be there in proportion. So another one is Lactobacillus. And this is an acid producer and defender. And these are common in fermented foods. They produce lactic acid, lower gut pH, which prevents pathogen overgrowth, or bad, not bad, but like opportunistic bacteria that like to overgrow and cause problems. Lactobacillus is going to prevent some of that. And it's going to support immune signaling. These guys are helpful for sure, but they are not the whole story. And apparently many people actually over-focus on lactobacillus because it's super common in probiotics. So a lot of probiotic companies, even like milk products, that anything, like any company that puts probiotics in their product may over-focus on lactobacillus, which is why it's really important to not just kind of go willy-nilly on like a probiotic, and doing your research and taking a targeted approach to those is important. So butyrate producers here. We're talking about Faecalibacterium as the main one, the main player that produces butyrate. These are critical because butyrate reduces inflammation again. This is kind of a review, fuels colon cells, and supports that barrier strength. Low butyrate producers are commonly seen in inflammatory gut conditions like IBS or Crohn's disease. So these guys, these Faecalibacterium, are metabolic heavy hitters. We want to make sure they are present, but not, again, like everyone else, overly present out of proportion. And then we have Akkermansia here, and that's kind of going to be the mucosal layer of the gut, the regulator of that. And this one gets a lot of attention for a big reason. It's like a lot of people out there actually have zero of this, and this can cause some disruption of the layer in between that we talked about, the layer in between your gut lining and your blood vessels. So we want that to be very strong, and if you have zero, then you might be more at risk to have leaky gut. And so Akkermansia lives there in that layer in between and helps regulate its thickness, and it's associated too with a lot more inflammation. If it's low, you're going to have a weaker gut barrier. And then if it's low, you also see people getting insulin resistance or diabetes with low Akkermansia, and higher levels of inflammation throughout their bodies. So if you have healthy Akkermansia, a healthy amount, which is more than zero, usually if people just have some, then it's easier to feed them and increase their population. But if there's enough, then you're going to have more stable metabolic health. You're going to be sensitive to insulin, and you're going to have lower inflammation. So these guys thrive on polyphenols and diverse fibers. And I don't know if you saw my story just now at the grocery store. I went to buy a bunch of polyphenols. So I have some like dark chocolate here. We have some pomegranate seeds. You can just like Google a list of polyphenol foods, polyphenol rich foods. And as long as you have more than 0% Akkermansia, you can feed those puppies and bring them up into a healthy population. So the tie back here, right, is always to foods that can feed these guys and keep them healthy, because all of these main 4 here, if they are in a healthy proportion, then they are going to fight back these opportunists, which is what we're going to talk about really briefly here next. I don't know what's happening right now. My mouse is stuck. There we go. So yeah, that got weird. Sorry, hang on a second. I lost my spot. So these opportunists they're not evil bacteria. They're the ones we don't necessarily want overgrowing, because you hear people getting sick from this, right? Like we have C. diff, which you might have heard from as like a hospital-acquired infection that gives you really bad digestive issues and diarrhea, and people can actually die from this bacteria actually overgrowing in their gut. And some of you who've gotten your tests back have some more opportunistic guys, right? Like E. coli, different species of E. coli overgrowing in the gut can cause you to be very symptomatic. And if it's too much overgrown, you can actually get very sick from these. So these first four that we talked about, they're very important to have them in healthy populations because they kind of tamp down these opportunists and don't allow them to overgrow to the point where they're going to make you sick. So that's right. That's where balance absolutely matters. And that's why we've been talking about balance in the gut so much in this presentation, because when these opportunists dominate, inflammation is going to rise a ton. You might feel a lot more bloating or a lot more gas, and that barrier function is going to decline. And usually people who see this have low gut diversity, low fiber diets, high stress, and other poor diet patterns. So healthy doesn't mean necessarily as much good bacteria as possible. Healthy means high diversity with strong production of everything we talked about in the last slide. So like those short chain fatty acids, those immune functioning cells, and then what else is back here? So these guys, right? These digestive enzymes, neurotransmitters, gut support compounds, immune signalers, vitamins, and short chain fatty acids. So we want to make sure that all of those things are getting made. So everybody who needs to do a job in your gut needs to be present in the right population. It's kind of like in the Army and in the Air Force, each unit has a document that states how many people is allotted to that unit for each job. So my unit right now has slots for 6 PAs. If our unit is healthy, we have 6 PAs. We have X amount of space operators, X amount of cops. And that's what your gut is like. You have like a manning document that says this is how many we need of what, and we need to make sure that manning document is filled, but not overfilled or underfilled in each of these different positions. So we're going to think of it as an ecosystem that needs to be balanced, not necessarily something that is like got a specific perfection number for each individual or like for a population. So everybody's going to be a little bit different and everybody's going to need something a little bit different. So the hierarchy of support. We'll go through this a little bit quicker because we've talked about a lot of it already. So this is definitely a recap. So number one, calories. You cannot optimize a stressed, underfed system, period. Number two, protein. That gut lining turns over rapidly and it needs amino acids to stay healthy. So I know I talk about this a lot with you guys. You're like, why do I need so much protein? And I'm like, well, because we want to build muscle, right? But before we can build muscle, our body has to account for all this protein turnover. And yes, your gut lining takes up a lot of that because it turns over so quickly. So you need a certain amount of amino acids every single day to just make sure that gut lining is healthy. So you can see if you're not getting enough calories and you're not getting enough protein, that is the absolute foundation. We're never going to prioritize putting protein into muscle if we're not just meeting these basic needs. So number three, fiber diversity. Different bacteria eat different types of fiber. And we're going to talk about fiber on the next slide. And then polyphenols, which we've talked about, these are that plant compounds that help regulate microbial balance and feed some of these good players to make sure they stay in healthy proportions. And then number 4, we have ferments here. So introducing fermented foods can help give your body more live microbes, and then you will have more things to support it. So I had some low GABA producers. So the big thing there is like we need to, and it was 0. It was literally 0. So it's like when we have 0, we need to introduce them, right? So the best way we can introduce some of these microbes is by eating fermented foods. Yeah, you're like, ugh, sauerkraut, kimchi, stevie, gross. I know, I feel you. But also like kombucha, miso. There's some good ones out there. If you get the pickles that are like in a jar that says like with live cultures, that's also ferments. Yogurt also has ferments as well. So there's just different kinds of players that you can get to add these fermented foods. And then number 6, supplements. So like probiotics, prebiotics. These need to be targeted, not random, like we talked about before, because different companies overestimate or underestimate what needs to be in there. So it's best to know, hey, we did this test, we know what's low, or we know what's overgrown, and we have a playbook to be able to combat that. So fiber and why diversity matters here. So there's really 2 different types of fibers, and then resistant starch is a subtype of insoluble fiber. So these 3 types of fibers are important. Soluble fiber feeds microbes. Insoluble fiber improves gut motility. And resistant starches fermented deeply in the colon and drives production of some of these short chain fatty acids like butyrate. So if you're only eating salad, you're missing the point. You might want more variety, but I know no one in here is eating just salad because I have your protein goals set pretty high. So fermented foods and probiotics and where they fit. Fermented foods introduce microbes and beneficial fatty acids. So probiotics are different strains and can be used as specific tools, especially after a course of antibiotics for persistent irritable bowel symptoms, and when testing shows low diversity or specific strains of these being low. So everyone who gets a gut health test here is like, hey, your Bifidobacterium is low, so we're going to use a single strain Bifido for you. If your Faecalibacterium is low, we're going to find stuff that's going to feed that. And everybody's is different. Not everybody needs the same thing. My Bifido was fine. I think I put half of you on Bifidobacterium single strain because it's super low and mine was perfect. So I don't have to do that one, right? I have to do a different one. So the targeting is what's important, not just like kind of laying down a generic probiotic necessarily may or may not be helpful for you depending. But most people do need prebiotics, which fiber actually counts as. So we want to use fiber first if we can. And we want to use fiber in conjunction with probiotics to help them work better. So fiber and why diversity matters. Was this the same? Yeah, fiber and why diversity matters. This slide's not supposed to be titled this. This is just supposed to be your daily playbook here. Like if you didn't have a gut health test, you didn't know what to do, but you were having some gut symptoms, basically this is where I would start. I would start with 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal, or whatever your protein goal is, because you guys get personalized precision numbers, right, for you and your body and where you're at right now. 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day, and that is kind of a blanket statement for most people. That is going to be the goal for women. And 5+ different plant foods per day, 1 bowel movement daily, and being sure that you are getting into that parasympathetic state or becoming calm before you eat food. If you're doing these things consistently, right? The bowel movement daily, you don't have a lot of control over, but hopefully if you're doing the other 4 of these things, then that will start happening. So if you're consistently doing this or supporting this, then you can be assured that probably your gut barrier integrity is good. your microbial diversity is high and that you have inflammation under control in your gut. So that's your big takeaway for the week. Are there any of these things, if you're on phase 2 and you've got phase 1 locked down, and I know there's only one of you here who's still locking down phase 1, no shade. So if you're on phase 2, which of these 4 things you should have the protein locked down? So 3 things: fiber, plant foods, and getting calm before meals. What do you need to work on? I want you guys to let me know in the comments to this video of the replay, and let's start working on some of this stuff. And if you have your gut health test back and you're having any trouble with anything, please let me know so I can support you best. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. Do you have any questions, Jessica? Any questions?
No, but I'm excited to do my gut health test, so I should probably get that done.
Yeah, get that in there because I'm looking forward to that too. And I want you guys to actually use that thing.
Yes.
Awesome.
But I don't have any questions. That was great.
Perfect. I'm glad that was helpful. And we can dive into more of this stuff as I learn more too. So, all right, guys. Have such a good night. I'm gonna try to figure out why my mouse keeps getting stuck because it's super weird. I can't even end this until I can get it unstuck. Here we go. All right. Everything's fine. All right. For sure. For sure. Stop, share, and have such a good night. Bye.